Welcome everyone to our September Lunchtime Learning, Civility in the Workplace, Chilly Climate, and Client and Employee Relationships with the one and only Dr. Juanita Cleaver Simmons. Please mute yourself if you haven't already. The recording of this session along with the presentation slides will be available on stopRED.org, usually by the beginning of next week, along with all of the other sessions. If you've missed any, feel free to check those out. They are on there to be viewed as well. There's also a blog on there called Making Connections. Feel free to check out all of the monthly blogs that Dr. Simmons has written for us, along with, and you're able to interact and ask questions and discuss. There will be a short survey at the end. Please take that survey. It is vital to our funding. I also wanted to mention we have a virtual Restorative Justice Summit coming up October 1st and 2nd. It is free. Please register for that if you'd like. I will put the registration link in the chat. And feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can put them in the chat or simply raise your hand or just come off mute. Dr. Simmons is very casual. And then I want to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Simmons.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. You know that the month of August was International Civility Month, and we started some conversations about civility. And from the response on your surveys, there was a request for more conversation. So I thought that I would end that segment of discussion about civility by looking at civility in the workplace, but looking at it from relationship perspectives. And in doing so, I looked at three major categories, and a couple of them I blended together. One is civility in co-worker relationships, civility in client and community relationships, and civility in relationships with authority. I went to Herzberg's theories of factors, principles involving job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction. And if you could see to the left in the deep purple color, job satisfaction, according to extensive research, is that which is influenced by motivator factors. Those motivator factors include, and I'm trying to get your thing off the screen without. Okay, those motivator factors include achievement, recognition, responsibility, the work itself, advancement, and personal growth. But on the far right side in the green, job dissatisfaction comes basically from what they call hygiene factors. And hygiene factors are simple things like working conditions, but critically important, and the focus of this discussion, co-worker relations, and then policies and rules, supervisor quality, base wage salary. So as we discussed, I hope that you know or remember that I'm very informal, and I welcome your comments and discussions. Right now, I may not be able to see your faces, but Liz is there. So if you have comments that you want to make or any concerns, raise your hand, put it into the chat box, talk to me. I wanted to first look at the hygiene factors that you saw from Herzberg's factors about job satisfaction or dissatisfaction. His study found that employees have high satisfaction when there is a friendly, welcoming, inclusive working condition versus the chilly climate. Now, we are basically public servants, which means that a lot of the work and much of our work environment, some of you work in courts, some of you work in juvenile centers, but we work in places that are basically hierarchical and very structured because they are federal, they're government influenced. And so it's easy for the climate to be pretty chilly, meaning that there's not a lot of time that we spend with developing employee relationships, collegiality. We will often find that the environment, even when you walk in the buildings, are kind of sterile looking. And then it creates, or as a result of that, we have a lot of silos that, we have our little nested units over here where we work, and we just deal with that. But according to the studies, more open, friendly, welcoming, inclusive working conditions bring about job satisfaction. And it also creates open and authentic co-worker relations versus a clannish avoidance behavior, social caste system. Now, my years of working in government type structured organizations, from higher ed to public schools to state education offices to some of the work that I've done contracting with schools in Ireland and other places, I noticed that there is a tendency to have a social caste system. So you've got your C-suite individuals, your higher executive level people, and then you've got your mid-range people, your working class, and then you've got your technical crew, the foot soldiers, so to speak. And unknowingly within our organizations, we perpetuate what is called a social caste system. And so it creates some of this avoidance behavior. We don't know each other. I see you, but I wave. You're in a different division, that type thing. But that brings about job dissatisfaction. The other thing that brings about job satisfaction is clear policies. When you come into the job and you have HR handbook training about codes and policies, often that training is not repeated. We know that because we are federally influenced, we have to abide by the federal titles, Title 9, 6, 4, and all of those titles. But then very few organizations stop and look at whether or not they have a harassment bullying policy. Do you have one? You might see a statement on harassment. Is there training about this? Is there an open platform where people who feel that they are being harassed or bullied can feel safe? And then, is there a civility policy? Now, right now in this anti-woke society, what we're finding a lot of pushback from diversity, equity, and inclusion and belongingness. It's almost become a bad word. So many of the organizations have gone into what they're calling psychological safety in the workplace. They're calling it civility in the workplace, whatever language you choose, but civility is just common courtesy and respect. Dissatisfaction comes when there's no enforcement and when there's no recognition of enforcement through evaluation and rewards. There's some people in organizations everybody reaches out to. They are the friendly people. They are the people regardless of race, denomination, religion, whatever, political persuasion, gender persuasion. There are people everybody can feel safe to reach out to, and they want in the corner. They will whisper for advice. These people in our traditional government structures are not awarded for this. They're not recognized for this. This doesn't come up in evaluation and rewards with most of our organizations. The other thing that brings about satisfaction is supervisor quality, fair promotions, tenure, caring supervisors. And with that, the discussion, when people say, who are the fair, are the supervisors of quality? I urge you to do what Jackson County started, a book study on the multiplier, because it's the type of leadership where you develop, and I'll talk a bit more on that, where you develop versus diminish, and you rid yourself of this authoritative type behavior as a supervisor, and you become a better listener. You get rid of the my way or the highway. That's called, according to the multiplier, that's called being a diminisher in your leadership. The last part of Hertzberg's principles deal with base wages and salaries. Dissatisfaction comes when there's no cost of living, no growth opportunities. Now, I shun at speaking about that because in our highly structured traditional government organizations, salary is set, wages are there. A lot of times there's not a lot that we can do about. My father was like a GS-15, and they said they had these government levels that framed that. But what I did discover as a principal of large high schools and working with staffs, and training and certifying principals on the university level, something that I did find out is, in agreement with Hertzberg's study, people are more motivated and satisfied with their jobs when they have friendly employee relationships, that hygiene part that we talked about, when they are acknowledged. So because as a principal, I couldn't just, it was very rare, that I had an opportunity to say, this person needs a raise, because that was a board decision. And so it went through a procedure that often was beyond my control. But I invested in community partnerships to bring in refreshments and celebrations and certificates and acknowledging individuals as best I could. So at this point, I would love to hear from you all, because I would like to know what your thinking is. So I'm going to see if I can see your faces, or if you'll just speak out. Comments, please. Thoughts? Do we have any comments or thoughts on job satisfaction and civility, building relationships? Okay, then I will move on. Just a brief part about quality in your supervisors. The multiplier is one who hires talented people. He develops those people, or she develops them fully, and they help them to succeed. The key is helping people to succeed. People thrive under those leaders, the talent magnets who are multipliers, and they create what is called a cycle of attraction. Everybody wants to be on their team. Everybody wants their department. And then the diminisher, or the empire builder, can hire talented people but underutilize them. Sometimes they feel that this person is going to outshine them. They will hoard the resources for their own gain or to make their team look great. Talents are stunted, results suffer, and it creates what they call a cycle of decline. At any point you have comments, open up. So it's the tyrant versus the liberator in supervisor quality, when we are aiming for a liberator supervisor quality for civility and leadership. Motivator factors we looked at as on the part of what is satisfaction, but the motivator factors, again, achievement, recognition, responsibility. That responsibility part can be a little foggy, because sometimes individuals are given menial, repetitive work, unnecessary, excessive task, and often, although motivator factors with your superior supervisor quality people who are into developing people, sometimes they make the mistake of thinking, oh, this person is so talented, I can rely on them, and then they will pile a little bit more on them. And so discussion is needed there to make sure that there is kind of a balance with that. And then work itself, the work itself. Sometimes we go into professions where we know the work is what it is. And later on we find out, well, maybe, this is something I need to look at, that it's making my behavior change, or I'm not as civil to my colleagues and to my clients. So there's always something to consider when it comes to work itself. And then advancement opportunities, personal growth. Even if a lot of pay is not involved, people love growth opportunities. If you understand adult learning theory, which is andragogy, and some people call it andragogy, but if you understand adult learning theory, what becomes a priority to the average professional adult, or one who is seeking higher levels of professionalism, is an opportunity to grow. They want to learn something new. They want to advance, and they don't want to be in a position where they can't grow. It's like a plant, drying out. Comments before we go into civility with clients and community. I'd like to hear from you all. Let's take a minute. Comments, thoughts. We have a quiet audience today here. Let me just stop a minute and just see if there are any questions then. Are there questions, comments? Okay, I want to now get into civility with clients and community.
Oh, hold on, Dr. Simmons. Marcia was going to say something, but I think she's on mute. There she goes.
Sorry. I turned my video on and then forgot to turn my audio on. Just a comment. I just think, and I've heard you speak with respect to civility in the workplace numerous times. And I just I'm hoping that others on the Zoom call feel the same as I do. This is just such an important topic, and we can't speak about it enough. Civility is incredibly important in the workplace and just in society. As your slide mentions, it's being kind and respectful all the time to everyone. So just a comment. So
I appreciate your comment, Marcia. And I took your recommendation about putting more emphasis on relationships in looking at civility. So I've expanded this into a broader lens, looking at relationships too. And so I'm grateful for that, because often we look at civility and we look at it just as a personal thing in the workplace. But the importance of building those relationships with the community, the clients we serve, our colleagues, our authority, those are key extensions of civility. Thank you. Any other comments out there? So now when we look at civility with clients and the community, that's called social civility. Civility in society is more than just the simple politeness. It includes disagreeing without disrespecting. And I thought that in relationship building, it would be critical in the midst of what we're going through in America with this political turmoil, with a lot of the anti-woke paraphernalia and signs that you see everywhere. It is very important that in our positions as public servants, we understand the importance of disagreeing without disrespecting, and then seeking common ground. A lot of times people have various thoughts and values and beliefs, and we can never change or shift those, but we can find common ground. When people get into discussions with me about denominations, their religious beliefs or whatever, I try to find what's the commonality. The commonality is we are Americans. The commonality, we all have to pay taxes. The commonality is we're all looking for better health coverage. And so we try to establish a platform of seeking a common ground. A lot of people are now responding and they're acting in very negative ways when people disagree with them. It brings on disrespect. But we need to do as you've been trained to do, and that's to understand the various biases and then to teach others how to do the same. We have to take the responsibility of teaching others how they ought to be and not necessarily of teaching how I am according to my beliefs, but the common part of courtesy and the part of respecting regardless of our disagreements. In essence, social society is just a public space where people can debate and take action on various issues. And those issues are those that are related to common ground. Now, I would like to open the mic again and ask you all, in today's social and political climate wars, where many issues are being challenged, how should professionals who work in public spaces respond to issues that challenge their values and or their beliefs? How do you think in your positions in the midst of this, how do you think you should respond when these things come up, whether it's co-workers or community clients? How do you think you should respond? Run away from it or what? Or have you ever had any of these experiences? Have you been confronted with it? And if so, how did you respond? So I guess you're working in spaces where people are agreeing on a lot of these things in politics and there's no discussion. Is that the case? What's going on?
So oh, go ahead.
For the most part, we know that we tend to have differences in opinions, especially when it comes to things like politics and religion. But I think it's always safe for us to keep those personal opinions for after 5 o'clock, and really just kind of focus on the word.
Okay. Thank you for that. She was like, keep those opinions to yourself and focus on the word.
I'm sorry, I would say keep an open mind with a listening ear to gain understanding of the people that have different opinions, to see where they're coming from and just try to gain an understanding of what they see. Because I'll be one, I mean, I definitely don't understand what a lot of people see. So I'm always curious of where they're coming from. And because a lot of times, you know, it could be based on experiences that they've been through in life. So it's see it more as an enlightenment, a learning to be able to create that acceptance of differences of opinions.
Thank you. Thank you. So the listening part and trying to seek understanding of another person's views. Okay, thank you for sharing that too. So we've had 2 responses. One is just keep it to yourself and talk about it after you get home. The other person is like, let's listen, let's hear what you've got to say. And so maybe I can better understand why you think the way you do. Any other thoughts? Researchers are saying that it is critical that we begin to have in safe spaces, open debates and clarification. And that has to be safely guarded and critically observed to know the right time, the right people, the right opportunities. Some organizations are having like brief little sessions where they introduce and allow people to actually talk, and they may have research little articles from both sides or whatever. And some are saying, I don't want to enter into this politics. But if they are issues, particularly relative to your profession, you all deal with LGBTQIA youth, and it is critical that people are very intentional of not showing their discomfort when it comes to the children, because their emotional stability is at stake. And so sometimes it's important to kind of talk about this to help people to understand that regardless of what your views might be, it is important as an organization that we understand that X percentage of our population are those who may suffer from potential suicide because of LGBTQIA internal conflict. So we need to at least make each other aware. And the common ground is the child and our positions. So we look at these things, but we have to at least not shut the door on them on all cases, those particularly related to our children and the work that we do. Any other comments? Thank you all for sharing in that area. And should you have other thoughts, let's talk about it.
Dr. Simmons, Altman has something to say.
Good.
I was just going to say that I'll list all the comments, and I agree on both accounts about the after work and also listening to what the other person has to say. I think in a professional environment that you maintain your professionalism, but also important for your own growth and the growth of as a whole, that we be able to communicate with one another and listen to what others' opinions are, or share the diversity, because in diversity, whether it be in religion, whether it be whatever it is, your morals, your beliefs, that's who we are as Americans. We're different beliefs, we're different races, we're different, but that's what makes us who we are. So we have to have understanding of one another. When you have understanding of each other, I think that's better for everyone. But when those lines are crossed, when it's disrespectful, is when that's an issue, and that should be addressed. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Excellent. And that's where those policies, harassment, bullying, where organizations have to be very careful and clear that they keep their visions and their missions and their policies repeatedly before each other, so that they will understand that this can only go so far. And then you have to use discretion with it, because now we're living in a society where there's a lot of heightened anxiety, and we have to be careful and observant. This is why it's great when these things are structured in professionally, and you have opportunities with authorities to come in and to talk, and then to open up and help to rid some of these barriers. When you spoke a minute ago, you talked about various perspectives. Originally, when we defined diversity years ago, it did not include diverse perspectives. Now, diversity includes diverse perspectives, that people do have different perspectives. And that's a part of diversity, regardless of race, language, ethnicity, gender, persuasion. There is also a part of that intersectionality, diverse perspectives. Any other comments before we look at the community relations? Things to remember when you're being involved in the community, and many of our RED communities, racial and ethnic disparity communities under MJJA, some of the work that's being done, many of them are doing community forums. It's some outstanding work and if you all have not looked at MJJA's website and looked at racial and ethnic disparities, restorative justice, look and see what's going on, because there's a lot that's happening. And even with some of the other special projects, like in Kansas City, some of the community projects that they're doing. But I thought about this when our last session, and I think it was Teresa who said from their project that they're doing in the community in Kansas City, she had to ask some of her colleagues, hold back, and because you're taking over and not hearing or giving enough of a platform to the community. And so I thought about this with community relations, social civility that you just saw the definition of. You know, it involves getting to know the families, the family engagement, building positive relationships, meaningfully involve families. But when we as the professionals go out to do our community involvement work, I don't know why this is coming up. What we do have to be careful of is professionally representing our organizations while remaining supportive and approachable and non-defensive of those organizations. Sometimes we get out in the community and they may have some things where they have not felt comfortable with our organizations and they may have some things to say. Be professional, represent your organizations in a positive way because you represent what people will think about your organizations. But at the same time, as you support them, you need to be an approachable person and you need to be non-defensive in your mannerism. You don't want to just be so defensive. Oh no, don't do that. Listen and hear and observe authentically. Listen to what they're saying. Make a note of it because maybe there are some things internally that we need to check out. And then ask relevant questions. Sometimes asking a question can diffuse some things where you say, were you in the right department when you came to our building? Oh, okay, then what happened is you didn't get the response that you needed. So ask relevant questions and then show no hierarchy. A lot of times we turn people off because we have this spirit of hierarchy, that somebody has to have a title, somebody has to be Miss So-and-so in the community, somebody has to have this degree or that degree. And this is a person, when we are having community forums and the meetings, this is a person we will use as a loudspeaker. But it says to other people who may not be of that particular class or structure or whatever, it says to them that this is who we listen to. You're not worthy. So we have to be careful of that, to listen and hear all voices so that we don't have bias in social class or a bias in standing. And then the next meeting we'll look up and that whole little community from over there at Fraser Courts Project, they're no longer there because you said to them in a little way that we don't hear you. We only hear these people who have this particular standing. Whatever leadership, when we're doing community relations and forum groups, people would have normally already selected their leader, or they have unconsciously given leadership authority to a particular person in their group. Support their leadership and hear their group's choice. Don't select who you want to be the leader out of their group. Clearly seek understanding of their concerns and show your interest by writing or getting up on the board or having someone to list their concerns. A lot of times people will say, oh, they didn't even write that down. Show some effort in recording their concerns, regardless of how menial it might sound. Write it, show it to them, and then follow up and respond to their concerns in a reasonable time. Follow up. Show them that you care. Show them that you mean it by following up. And this is how you build community relations, by this simple act of social civility. Any comments on that thought? Okay, now I want to talk about civility with direct clients. Your clients who are the children, the juveniles. I've been looking at some of the work that came out of the Minaret Foundation on kids who have been handcuffed. And they have this new policy called No Kids in Cuffs. They have now gotten it to a House bill, but they have taken it and it's been shut down and put on hold in the Senate. And it's just where they want to close public policy loopholes that strips officers of their agency and forces young children into dangerous situations. the idea came out of a conversation with a particular sheriff who was a candidate. And the question that was asked was what they do to mitigate the entrance and effects of the school to prison pipeline. What should you do? And the first thing he said is in handcuffing of children in this region. Now, when we're talking about the handcuffing part, and this can become very controversial, and I hope that we'll have further discussions on it, their focus is on elementary school age children who are unarmed. So they began the Minaret Foundation in researching children who were handcuffed, where and who, when they found out children as young as 5 years old were placed in handcuffs. And that some of them were handcuffed because of stimming. If you are one who is a school resource officer, if you're a policeman, if you're around school activities, understand what stimming is. We in special ed know what stimming is, but this is when a child who may have autism spectrum, be on the autism spectrum disorder, and that's, I think, not an acceptable term, but a child who may have Asperger's or some form of autism, that stimming takes place. And this is where they will repeat a physical action, and literally we call it getting stuck on it. Whether it's repeating with their hands, their fingers, their movements, and not hearing what you're saying when you say, get up and go and do this. They are then frozen into this, and this is called self-stimulation. It is their way of trying to seek safety in an imbalance when something has happened to them, somebody's bullied them or whatever. And so sometimes it's not just the physical moving, it might be the repeat of something that they're saying over and over again, or some act of something that they have to have. And this is what often gets them in trouble, where they're considered unsafe. Comments on this, because this is what many of the studies Minaret found brought on handcuffing of elementary age kids, is when they were stimming. Ideas, experiences, thoughts, anybody? Okay, have you all heard about the no cuff? Is that a discussion?
No.
I hear someone saying something.
No, we hadn't heard that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's now in Congress and they're waiting for the approval from the Senate because they're trying to get a national policy about this. And it comes under disabilities of children and the part of that. But one thing that escalated it, and I hope I can do this 50-second tape.
Turn around, put your hands behind your back. No. Turn around, put your hands behind her back. Now you're resistant. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. I'm trying to go get my shoes.
Were doing whatever they could in order to solicit a felony charge against a 10-year-old. It's sick. I mean, a special needs 10-year-old.
Sounds like an assault of the whole person.
To do it? Well, it'll help.
In this situation, she wasn't posing a danger to herself or anyone else at that point in time.
If they'd like her to be released to me, please. Are you charging her right this second? If you're not charging right now, are you charging her?
She is detained, sir.
Okay, you need to release her.
No, sir.
Okay, I wanted to show that to you because that recording really went to the point that one of the congresswomen, Sylvia Garcia out of Texas, saw this. Interestingly enough, the child's father was a policeman in another jurisdiction, and the child had a disability. The stimming was when she kept saying, I had to get my shoes, I have to get my shoes. She was stimming, and this was her attempt to self-regulate. Now, I have the follow-up case study and the follow-up interview with her parents and the little girl. The parents permitted the little girl to do an interview. And so I have that, and that will be a part of my presentation in October, where there's more time and where those who are seeking CLE training can have more of a discussion, and we'll do the case study and the role playing about ways to circumvent and to look at and identifying stimming versus the handcuffing. Garcia, the Congresswoman, said many children have been put in adult-sized handcuffs as a form of discipline. And as a result, there have been at least 20 student fatalities since 2009 because of poor restraint techniques and children simply being too small. And so now there's a policy, and it can be corrected by proper training and policies that ultimately will eliminate this practice. Now, Liz did some research and sent the policies to me on the appropriate way or what is suggested in Missouri, although there was very little conversation in that document about cuffing. And so we'll have more discussions about that and to look at more conversations. Now, to me, this conversation is, again, an example of disagreeing, but still respecting, because police officers may have a different view. Some of them may disagree. Some, it appears, you have some enforcement officers who disagree with even restorative justice. It's difficult to get them to participate because we need to sit down and hear all sides of everything, because the commonality is the child. And self-regulation, the stimming versus the restraint, and this is their way of self-regulating. And when we take that away when they're stimming, we take away from them the possibility or the opportunity to self-regulate and to control themselves. I'd like to hear comments and thoughts from you all on this. This is a part of civility and the courtesy part that we can extend to each other in our profession. Thoughts, ideas. I can't see. Are there any thoughts and ideas or chats in there, Liz?
No, I do see Adrian, you're off mute if you had something to say.
I do.
Go ahead.
This is Teresa Ramsey from the St. Louis City Juvenile Court. I do think it's definitely traumatizing for a child if they're already going through special needs and things that can trigger them. You know, police have to be trained. Teachers need to be trained how to handle situations. Handcuffs are not the answer for a child. I mean, I think as an adult, if I was handcuffed, it would be traumatizing to me. So let alone a child who is still trying to, whose brain is still trying to stimulate and grow, and to know that, hey, every time they see a police officer, that could be a trigger for them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm glad that you brought that part up because it does create trauma. Teresa, thank you. Someone else said that they couldn't make their mic work in the chat, but they're saying that they feel that there's more education that's needed on this. And as Teresa said, it does create trauma. Do I hear a comment? Did I hear someone else? Okay, looking at the part about trauma, studying the policy, according to Minaret Foundation, they found that children undergo physical, emotional, mental repercussions after the use of restraints in schools. They develop trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and can have short or long-term effects on sleep, socializing, and academics. The research further showed that these effects are not only felt by the children who are victims of restraint, rather they are felt by the children who witness the restraint happen, the educators, the staff, officers, parents as well. So, you know, other children in the environment who see this and see the handcuffing, see the child being placed in the back of the car. And when you see the lengthier videotape that was recently done, see this incident that I showed you, the videotape, it happened August 24th. And when I show you the follow-up that just came out, that has the interview from the child telling the whole story of how it happened, and then finding out that the teacher had a complete misunderstanding and that the parent had been called. When you find out the whole story, can you imagine the trauma involved with the kid being handcuffed and placed in the back of the car by the time the father had arrived to say, I told you all I was coming. Take her out of the car. No. So even that reinforcement of the father's recommendation and the father's loss of authority is another form of trauma. So I looked at some other things that happened a couple of years ago. Tiny risk in cuffs, how police use force against children. And there's a link to that if you want to read the whole story. But it happened when he was 8 years old. He was handcuffed for nearly 30 minutes outside alongside his mother and other adults. Neither nor anyone else was arrested at his family's home in Chicago South Side when they came in and they were at the wrong address to issue a warrant. And then there's another case that happened where a mother and her 3 or 4 children had been pulled over in a parking lot, and they were taken out of the car and held face down and handcuffed. And one of the children is now in severe depression. So these are things that we need to look at when we talk about why we can't build relationships in the community, why it's important to have civility. And so this will be a part of the CLE focus, hopefully, when we have the conference in October and we have more time to elaborate on that. So I'd like to leave time for you all to have discussion. And before I do that, I want to remind you all that we are in the midst of Hispanic Heritage Month. And so we are celebrating this because of our October conference. We will do that at the end with Felix Rosado. He's going to do a presentation October 30th. And he's doing this on looking at restorative justice, a system that he created while he was incarcerated. And he has a book out with a curriculum and a training manual. But he's going to talk about his experiences as a Latinx in American society and some of the experiences he had in being incarcerated at an early age. So don't forget to register for that. So in closing, I'd like to say that simple, safe acts of civility can build strong relationships inside and outside of the organization. And remember, trying to move it out of the way, that there is a form of attraction that you can create, or you can create a form of distraction, diminishing. At this point, I would love to have your questions and your comments so that you can have more time to speak on that. A lot of you have not heard from, and I got to hear from you. You know, I want to hear what you're thinking and what's going on so that we can know where we need to further ourselves. Alton, what's on your plate there? What are you thinking?
Sorry.
Can you?
Did I miss something?
No. I just wanted to hear from you.
Oh, I was very everything's very interesting. The civility, the no kids in cuffs. That should be a discussion, definitely, in my opinion, about what's necessary and what's not necessary, based on safety and not just policy, but common sense overall. So I think it's definitely a lot of good information and discussions that should be had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you attending too. Teresa Storch. Hi. What's on your mind?
Well, I can say we need discussions about no kids in cuffs. Number one, the point being made that they're small and the cuffs that they're using are not feasible for young children. Also, it is very traumatizing and beyond Asperger's. And I have a grandson, and this was hard for me to listen to this part because my grandson's 12. And a few months ago, he was put in handcuffs. He was experiencing bullying at school, and he told teachers, he reached out for help and no avail. One teacher even telling him, kids will be kids. And he has ADHD at an extreme level. He's on medication and somewhat autistic in the simple fact that I related with the young girl needing her shoes. He has to have things in a certain place and operate a certain way. He doesn't like certain feels, certain material. And so the one day that this bully that he'd been experiencing had stepped up to him to pursue bullying again, once again, my grandson actually had a water bottle in his hand. So the only thing he knew to do was throw the water bottle at this kid to get him to back off. And it was then my grandson was the threat and was the one that was put in handcuffs and taken. I'm the grandmother, and I was very, very appalled. And I've been in criminal justice a lot of years, started out in policing. And so I take a lot of this stuff to heart, but I also have family. And sometimes I think until it happens to you, you don't feel what I feel. You don't, we have a certain compassion for children. And one thing that's frustrating for me when I look at our government and I look at, especially the federal government, is the fact that they don't want to decipher and put boundaries for specific situations. They want to group everything in one big pot. And like you said, there needs to be parameters for certain situations that don't qualify for that extremity. And so it was very eye-opening for me. This is a conversation I think is definitely needed. I do believe, being in the field, that we have some very detrimental children that need some serious help and are going down the wrong path. Absolutely 100%. I work with juveniles, and I see the majority of the kids that come through here have gun charges. So, but it's frustrating when our society and our schools will take that situation and cup it together with throwing a paper wad at somebody else, maybe because of bullying. When it comes to even looking at school shootings, the only thing they want to do is look at guns. They don't want to look at what led up to that point. And I think a lot of it has to do with the school systems. And we talk about training. We talk about training the police officers, training the teachers. Can you train humanity in these people? Can you train them to recognize we're supposed to have common sense? Education doesn't teach you common sense. And you should be able to recognize, I've had to recognize certain situations through here and where I work with juveniles, and where you can't just say, oh, well, you know, that's how it is. That's black and white. That's what we do. This is how it's done. Boom, bam, boom. No, you can't be like that, especially when you work with kids. Because like you said, a lot of them have issues, and such as also ADHD and high anxiety levels.
Yeah.
High anxiety levels.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, this was very, I was like, how did she know to even ask me? Because yeah, I was trying to sit back and just listen on this one. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for sharing. And interestingly enough, the case of the quick video that I showed, the source of it in the interview with the parents and the child and the teacher ended up being bullying from another child. And this is one of the reasons why I say, even with organizations, it is important to have a harassment bullying policy because, it's important to have that. And I have a sample of one that I designed for university. So anybody who wants to look at a possibility of a model, it's not the have all be all, but I'm glad to share. Can we take one more? Do we have time for one more comment, Liz?
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to hear from Mr. Belcher. Ahmad, can you unmic? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I was trying to get to a mic. I was listening. We did go through the multipliers book and information, and there's a lot of it was some review information for me, and I try to conduct myself in a way that I am approachable. I try to be helpful, as helpful as I can with my coworkers and people I work with, and and I take the attitude of, as far as different points of views and people, everybody's got a different point of view. Everybody's got a different idea. I'm no one's judge. So, you have a right, as America, you have a right to live the life you want to live. However you live your life doesn't affect mine. So I can respect that you living your life the way that makes you happy. And, my feeling is, there's a whole continent of people that like to eat mayonnaise with French fries. I don't, but that's okay. Everybody can do what they want to do. Especially in America. That's the good thing about America. That's what we're supposed to be. But I'll say the thing with the officer and the handcuffing for stemming. I've got a brother that's autistic. He's 39 and he still lives with my mom. One day he'll live with me. And when you're talking about the stemming behaviors, that's stuff he did, and trying to restrain or handcuff him when he's doing that, that's going to make the situation 10 times worse, especially if he's agitated. And I get fearful of that, and I have been about him, because he's not a small man. I'm a large man. I'm 6'5", so is he. He's like 250. And so if you can imagine, if he was angry, agitated, or upset, and then you're trying to handcuff him, it's to get to him, you have to talk to him, get his attention, get him to listen, talk calmly, try to get his mind to go elsewhere besides what's agitating him. Sometimes you can get him to talk about it isn't what you want, because that makes him madder.
Yeah.
Distract him. You just kind of have to, and everybody's different. Kind of got to know who you're working with and how they respond. So people are not going to know that off, right away just from a stranger. But you kind of have to. People need to be trained on how to pay attention and pick up on cues, and try to adjust and change according to the person that's in front of you, because everybody doesn't respond the same way to the same type of interaction.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And the part of when they're stemming, and you were talking about your brother even being a larger size, and sometimes you can't talk them out of it. That is their form of self-regulating. And as long as there's nothing dangerous, why don't we let them reach their own regulation level? And this is what I did as a certified special ed person working at an institution for all level adults. I would let them just continue the stemming part as long as it was nothing dangerous. We've got 1 minute left, Liz. Let me turn it over to you. Thank you all so much. And don't forget the surveys, but Liz, there you go.
Great job. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank Dr. Simmons for another wonderful session. Like I said, it'll be on our website if you'd like to view it again. I did put some links in the chat. One for the Virtual Restorative Justice Summit. That's October 1st and 2nd. That's free. So you can sign up for that. And then I also put a link to our fall conference, which is October 16th through 18th. And there's a link to check out all our speakers. We have some really great RED speakers that I'm pretty excited about, so be sure and check that out. And then our lunchtime learning session, there's a link to register for that. And that will be October 30th and that's with Felix Rosado, and the restorative justice and his book. So that will be great. Feel free to register for all of those. And I think that is it. I appreciate you all being here, and I hope to see you next month. And take the survey, please.